What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So in this video I did want to talk about something here with Need for Speed Heat that I have been seeing popping up, and I have been also noticing people talking about it in recent videos that I did make on Need for Speed Heat. So this is going to come down to something simple. Do you guys actually think Need for Speed Heat was the closest thing to like the Need for Speed feeling, or at least the closest thing players were looking for, that actually was the closest thing to Need for Speed Most Wanted 2005? I have actually been seeing a lot of players talking about this recently. You know what? I actually agree in some ways that yes, this is probably the closest thing to like that Need for Speed feeling that everybody is looking for. Now, the first thing I do want to say though is I'm not saying Need for Speed Unbound is a bad game, because I actually feel like it's pretty dang good, and at least for a modern Need for Speed game it's actually being updated, which right there alone is probably going to be a pretty big plus, considering most of the recent Need for Speed games barely had any life cycles to them whatsoever. Like, they came out, they had a few rinky-dink updates, then boom, they would move on to the next title. So I am pretty dang happy that Unbound was updated, but it's kind of funny though, because even though Unbound is being updated still, and it most likely could get more updates next year, I feel like a lot of players are still going back to Need for Speed Heat. Like, what is the main reason why they are doing this? Now, I actually think I have come up with a few reasons to why I do think players are playing this game more, and why this Need for Speed game is probably going to be the best quote-unquote modern Need for Speed game, or the closest thing we actually get to Most Wanted 05, because let's be honest, everybody still wants a Need for Speed game like that one. I mean, that game did so many things well, and a lot of players definitely want that overall racing feeling back. Now, this is something I was thinking about though, like, why exactly do play... No. Now, this is something I have been thinking about a bit recently, like, why is it that players are feeling this way? Now, the funny thing is, I have been jumping on Heat, then jumping back onto Unbound and playing both of the games, and I have to admit, guys, there is definitely going to be a lot of positives with Heat that I feel like is a big reason why players are going back to it. Now, I do want to mention, though, I am going to do a video on, like, both of these games and the design of both of them, going down to, like, the single player, the multiplayer, different aspects of, like, upgrading. So do stay tuned for that one to see exactly which game actually did it better, or at least, you know, which game did it, then flaws obviously came out of it. But the reason I do think most people are going back to Heat is for one big reason. It's the gameplay, man. Now, that might actually sound kind of dumb like first glance, but hear me out for a second though, guys, because I would probably say at this point though, people might look at that statement and go, what are you talking about, Blocked? Every single racing game has its, you know, gameplay to it. How is one game going to be better? Like, all the Need for Speed games are similar. And you know what's funny is, like, the overall design of them, I guess you could say, is similar, but the gameplay aspects of each game is way different. If we look at something like Need for Speed Heat compared to Unbound and why players are on this more, which this can actually come down to a few factors, like number one, Unbound is not on last gen consoles. That probably plays a huge role in those numbers and stuff, but from what I have seen though, many people talking about this on Instagram, X, and everybody is basically going back to Heat. Like, I've been seeing so much gameplay on this game popping up, and I'm like, wait a second, man, like, why is everyone going back to it? And that is easily going to come down to one simple thing. It's the overall racing atmosphere. Now, that will most likely sound like a pretty bold statement, but I really do think this is actually going to be true. Every time I jump back onto Heat, this game just has a special feeling to it. The funny thing is everybody gets on to Need for Speed for a couple of things. It is going to be an arcade type of racing game. Like, if you are looking for a sim type of game, this is obviously not for you. Then again, players are not jumping on to Need for Speed for this to be a sim type of game, so that does make sense. But people are getting on this for some nice racing that's arcadey, and also going into some crazy police chases in their favorite cars, and having a great time in a crazy Need for Speed type of atmosphere. I'm not saying like Need for Speed Unbound is terrible, but when playing Need for Speed Unbound and jumping back onto Heat though, it really is going to be a big difference. Going into nighttime on Heat, guys, I even made a video about this. It is so much dang fun on Heat compared to Unbound, or basically any racing game that I would say has come out recently, at least on the Need for Speed side of it. Because when you are racing at nighttime in this game, there's no weapons from the police or you. Not that some of those were terrible, but players didn't like them. Then you're basically going against like a level 5 Heat. You have like the Rhino coming at you. There is police legit everywhere, and you're also going to have the Corvette Cop that has a crazy amount of speed in them. And then on top of that though, you can do the higher Heat level events that get you more reputation, which if you are like me, you most likely hit 1,000,000, then you want to get to 2, then you're like, okay, what about 3? And before you know it, you most likely realize you probably overdid it, but that's also going to be the entire fun factor to it. Basically, high risk, high reward. And that's also a big reason why players keep jumping on a Heat and most likely going into nighttime. I mean, it's funny, guys. I legit jump on Heat pretty dang often now. Jumping on the nighttime, doing some races, getting well over 1.5 million rep, just because it's so fun to stack reputation, do the events and be like, okay, maybe if I can get to a million this time without having to fix my car, or like, taking no damage from the police, let's see how far you can actually go with it. Like, it's such a dope experience. On a side note, you guys know what's also insane about it? If they actually did update this game in the correct way, now what I mean by this is they definitely could have made this even better. We all do know right now, like, the daytime and nighttime design is dope, which again I am going to touch on this in a future video. They definitely could have made nighttime even crazier though, like they could have had like 3 or 4 heat leveled events in there. They could have probably had even more stuff when you get higher rep. You might actually unlock different events that have even more reputation in them, and they could have definitely given you extra money in those events, and there really could have been so much dope stuff they could have added. But we also have to agree that it is going to be hard to dwell on that stuff because now we're actually going to be on Need for Speed Unbound, where that game is being updated, and of course Need for Speed Heat isn't. It's kind of hilarious to me though because everybody's getting back on Need for Speed Heat. Everyone's actually enjoying it. Players are jumping back onto it. And literally every time I actually check Steam, Need for Speed Heat is always higher than Unbound, legit every single time. Now, a few things I did want to talk about with this though, and the main reason why I do think this is when I was playing Heat, guys, a lot of players I would guess are most likely playing in nighttime. If you actually want to make a lot of money, you go in the daytime, do some races. Luckily, making money in this game is going to be extremely easy compared to Unbound, at least the single player part of it. But luckily, if you did want to make money, it's not going to be that difficult. You then can jump onto like multiplayer and go in a nighttime race with your friends, mess around with police, and it really is going to be such a fun experience. And for me though, I do admit I actually like the police and Need for Speed Heat more than Unbound. Do let me know what you guys think about that. Which game do you like the police more in? I actually like the way they do act in this game, the way they race against you. I really do like the fact that you actually have the Rhino come after you. In Need for Speed Unbound, I cannot stand the Raptor cops, man. They are so frustrating. They're also way too fast. It does not make any sense. Like, I do understand they want to make the game challenging. Well, fun fact, it isn't challenging, it's more annoying than anything. I also did hear that apparently in Need for Speed Heat when the game came out, that the police were absolutely insane. Do let me know if you guys actually experienced that in the comments below. I did end up getting into this game a bit after, so I did not experience that. But from what I have heard though, the police were absolutely crazy back then, and even now they're still going to be pretty dang difficult in certain areas, but it's also going to be more fun than more annoying, which I really do think is the key here. But I'm also curious though, what do you guys think is going to be the biggest reason why most players are playing Heat more than Unbound? Or at least this game is having a bigger influx of players on it compared to that one. I really do feel like it is going to come down to like the overall gameplay atmosphere of Heat, compared to Unbound, with this game actually having like that more quote-unquote Need for Speed feeling, I guess, to it. Like, it just feels like a Need for Speed atmosphere, and that probably doesn't make no Need for Speed atmosphere, and that probably doesn't make that much sense, but I feel like that's the best way for me to explain it. It is kind of insane though, because even after the updates on Unbound, I still find myself going back to Need for Speed Heat way more often. It really is going to be such an odd thing. Then again, I also feel like many players also feel the exact same way as I do. Now, I'm also going to be curious though, guys, do you think Need for Speed Heat though is going to be the closest thing we have for like the best modern Need for Speed game, and the closest thing compared to like Need for Speed Most Wanted 2005, which is basically the game everybody compares the new Need for Speed games to, and it's most likely the most iconic Need for Speed game ever made? Do you guys think Need for Speed Heat is the closest thing to Most Wanted '05? I am also really excited to see the comments on this one. Who knows, maybe that can actually go into the next Need for Speed game, putting good things from each game and, taking the positives out of each one to make that game the best experience we've ever had. Once again, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I can't wait to see what you guys have to say.